then we're gonna go Reese Mahoney and Ann Rogers, and then Carly Block. Welcome.
Good evening. First, I'd like to say congratulations on the construction of Lodi High School. It is extraordinarily beautiful. Many of you know this, but I spend about 1,000 hours. Pardon?
And Roger. Gary, your phone might not be on mute.
Yeah.
My time.
Are we getting feedback? Is that what's delayed? Okay, thank you. Gary, you might need to mute your phone so that we can.
I did.
Okay, great. Here, try it again.
Should I start over? Lodi High is beautiful. No, just kidding.
Yeah, say that again.
Many of you know that I spend about 1,000 hours donating my time to the education of children every year. I believe in the education of children and want them to succeed in public schools and everywhere. Today, public school and public education is faced with a formidable enemy. Not the right-wing people or organizations. That's just a smokescreen and distraction precluding the thoughtful analysis of the proposed indoctrination of discrimination. Good parenting and good schools promote children being responsible for their actions. They promote the idea that the individual has the right to make choices and choose his or her own path. The formidable enemy of our children's future promote the idea that being lazy or mediocre is acceptable and that hard work and merit should not be rewarded. Discrimination may go by many names, many other names, but it's still discrimination. Let's face it, DEI is just another rebranding for discrimination, as well as CRT. The epitome of non-discrimination is when merit is rewarded. Those who work hard and achieve should get the acknowledgement and reward for their efforts. If public education chooses discrimination over merit and equality, then it does not deserve to exist. I hope you will save public education by rejecting discrimination and seeking to promote excellence in performance so that our children can succeed today and in their future. As requested, I have a little bit of a handout to see, you can see what we're up against.
Thank you. You can. Would you like to give them to Michelle or Dr. Wash?
Thank you.
Thank you. Emily, you're up next, and then Reese, you're right after Emily.
I would like to fill you in on the type of educator that you chose to fire last week, since none of you actually know the type of educator that I was and are wrongfully classifying me as insubordinate, which, by the way, is extremely pathetic. Despite not having a credentialed teacher in our classroom since mid-2020, we paras stepped up and ran that classroom. Despite the little to no support that my coworkers, who are also paraeducators, and I received from this district when it came to having the material for our preschoolers, we worked very hard and did our best to educate our students ourselves with what little we had. Despite the people that you choose to be substitute teachers with little to zero experience in a special education classroom, we paras would still run the classroom while some of the subs sat back and watched us do everything. Not all, but most of the substitute teachers. Despite other staff who weren't wearing masks correctly or at all when inside a classroom or the cafeteria on Lawrence campus where I was the one that was chosen to be fired. Through all of this, I still willfully and with a smile on my face, for everyone to see by the way because my face wasn't covered, showed up and worked all while being reprimanded. I was confident in my decision to not wear a mask because I knew the masks were keeping my students from succeeding. All I was doing was applying your slogan, educating students for success. And the thing about this is I knew from the beginning I had to be willing to lose my job, though of course I hoped that that wouldn't happen with the help of you all. But I was clearly wrong in the hope after hearing that all of you voted in favor of my termination. 6-0, really? 6-0? Not one of you could have found it in yourselves to stand up for mask choice? I hope you never forget the wrongful termination that you voted for. And as far as insubordination goes, you can ask Kelly Collins for yourself what she thinks of my job performance. Because from what I remember, she said that I have a gift working with children. And this was a statement she made as I worked with the students without a mask on. Don't you think if I was truly an insubordinate employee that my job performance would be affected in a negative way? That's right, it never was. My job performance was only affected in a negative way when I had a mask on. So let it be known that I did all of this for the students of this district who are still struggling, because unlike you all, I actually put the children's education above my paycheck.
Thank you. Reese, are you up? There you are. And then Ann, you are next.
Reese Mahoney, proud husband of Emily Mahoney. First, I'd like to read from Proverbs 3 of the Bible. Do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it's in your power to help them. If you can help your neighbor now, don't say, come back tomorrow and then I'll help you. Don't plot harm against your neighbor, for those who live nearby you trust you. Don't pick a fight without reason when no one has done you harm. It's sad because you aren't just figureheads who are making rules for people you don't know. You're making rules for people who are your neighbors, who know you personally. The fact that you would fire someone days before a mandate is lifted is pretty pathetic. I was just talking to Mrs. Heberly about a month ago, and she said that her husband is appalled at these rules and that he's doing everything that he can to get these mandates to stop. And then the first moment that he has to vote against it, he does nothing. Last week I didn't see a board. I saw a 6-headed serpent who striked at the first thing that the good doctor pointed to. This isn't a joke. This isn't something to laugh about. This is serious. You walk into this building without a mask on, and then you get in front of the camera and you put on a mask. It's weird that you're so about the rules, Mr. Porter, when back when you were driving us down to water polo tournaments, you drive 90 miles per hour down the interstate with your Beats headphones on, while none of us were wearing seatbelts, by the way. You were in charge of all of those kids, and you weren't following rules then, so what changed now? Yes, I'm calling you out personally because this is personal now. These are your neighbors. We're not just random people. I didn't plan a speech today. I just thought I'd speak from what I'm feeling. It's sad that even when these mandates may be dropped, that kids will still go to school with masks on because the fear has been indoctrinated into them. It's sad. It really is. And I can't help but think that you guys could have done something about it a lot sooner.
Thank you. Ann Rogers. Is it Rogers or Rogan? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Rogers.
Rogers, okay. Thank you.
Hello, it's me again. And I brought a prop. Extra, read all about it. Front page of the record. Mask mandates lifted beginning March 12th. So now I'm hoping, really hoping, because you all from the beginning of the year when I've been coming here, you couldn't do anything about the mask mandate because the state was tying your hands. And now, come the 12th, just in time for spring break, but when the kids come back, they can choose not to wear a mask unless you all decide that they should. And I hope you don't do that. Other school districts, I understand, are doing that. San Diego, San Francisco. I hope you're better than them. So far, I'm very disappointed. And I don't know what 11 more days is going to do with them with their masks on, but regardless, I'm pretty happy that the governor has announced what our children get to do with their faces. I actually prepared something this time to read, but I think I covered it all. I'm more of an impromptu speaker. I went to Lodi High. I was on the speech and debate team. I did pretty well. Really out of practice, but these meetings are helping me get a little better. It's not great, but I think if I have to keep coming, pretty soon I'm gonna get super good at this. I'm gonna read a little quote because that's what I like to do, because I think these people that lived before us had some pretty cool things to say. This one is from Gandhi. A coward is incapable of exhibiting love. It is the prerogative of the brave. Hope you all are brave. Also, I wanted to show you too. I went shopping this weekend. They sell the Constitution of the United States of America with the Declaration of Independence in it, in this handy little thing, and I'm carrying it everywhere I go, and I'm sharing it. So there's good things that have come out of all this. I'm educating myself about things I've kind of took for granted. So I'm inspired. I'm hoping you all will be inspired. I hope if you want to wear a mask, you wear one. If you don't, then don't. And do the same for our kids. This is all theater. I'm sick of it. And I really don't want to get better at speech, so I don't want to have to come back here. Thank you.
Carly, you're up next.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As you know, I'm Carly Block. I have 2 students at Vinewood Elementary. Being a parent of school-aged children right now is tough. Every day I watch my kids walk onto a closed and locked campus. I'm not allowed to go past the front gate. They've been in school over 100 days, and I've been in each of their classrooms empty one time. I don't know who their friends are. I'm unable to volunteer. I have no idea how or what their teacher teaches. I don't know where they ate lunch. I've never seen their cafeteria. If my children didn't tell me there was a library on campus, I would have no idea there was one. I didn't know what our principal looked like until 2 weeks ago, and even then he was masked outside, so I don't think I would recognize him in a lineup of similar faces. When I need to drop something off for my kids, I ring a doorbell, and a faceless voice asks me how they can help me, as if I'm ordering a cheeseburger at a drive-through window. Eventually, a masked office worker comes to the gate and reaches for their things and asks for my student's name, because they have no idea who I am or who my child is either. My 2nd grader had a teacher for an entire school year last year, and to this day, I've never once seen her in the flesh. I only ever saw her on Zoom. Since last week, parents have come out of the woodwork confirming stories of un-American teachers and administrators intimidating, discriminating, sleeping in class, shoving their political opinions down the throats of our kids, forgetting that their job is to facilitate learning and critical thinking and shape their minds to think for themselves. The Teachers Association protects these teachers, forgetting that the children come first. The children's education comes first over any teacher's job and paycheck. They don't have masks for kids with higher efficacy rates because children were never meant to be masked. It is unhealthy for their cognitive and respiratory development. Dozens of people have stood in this very spot, and many just like it, and have pleaded with you to choose the children's best interest, their physical and mental health. And you've just sat there staring like robots. And in the moment, and then the moment you feel disrespected, you get up and you leave, and one of you chooses to not return. Listening to us parents who are desperate for a better life for our children and have been pleading with you, you've passed the buck and you get up and leave. There's no one in this room that has been more disrespected than the parents and the students. Dozens of teachers have come up to me from your district thanking me for coming here and standing up for those who cannot speak because they are afraid for their job. Parents and employees of this district are afraid to say how they really feel. Do you know how sick and twisted that is, that a parent can't stand up for their kid? Stop doing your job and please just do what's right for our kids and our families. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our public comments, and we're going to move on to comments from our student reps. Hello, Melissa, and hello, Taylor. Who would like to go first? We have...
I'll be going first. Thank you, President McFarland, members of the board, Dr. Washer. Last week was National FFA Week, so students participated in a Spirit Week and enjoyed numerous activities like pieing someone in the face and a petting zoo at lunch. Student government held a game night this past Friday night, and students that attended played basketball, volleyball, card games, and so much more. On Wednesday of last week, a group of 75 Tokay students, led by Mr. Brian Campbell, gave a presentation at Lodi Middle School regarding all of the amazing classes, clubs, and sports you can put your interest into to make their time at Tokay so much more memorable. Our PTSA is holding an outdoor spring formal on Saturday, March 5th, and Tokay Theater has a spring production of Romeo and Juliet on April 6th, 7th, and 8th. Tokay Robotics won their regional competition and will now be competing in the state championship. Our Tokay pool had some maintenance issues, but is now back up and running, and the swimmers are back being fish. Tokay's Powder Puff team has their first game this Thursday against McNair.
Great, thank you. Any board comments, or we'll let... Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President, Dr. Washer, members of the board. I am Marissa Duterte, the ASB President, Ronald U. McNair High School. So a few successful events we just had was our multicultural celebration. So last Thursday we had our first multicultural celebration since 2019. The different clubs were able to share and educate everyone about their cultures. So we had performances from the Filipino, Cambodian, Latinx, Hmong, and Vietnamese clubs at McNair. Upcoming, we have our Powder Puff football. So we plan to face off Tokay this Thursday, March 3rd. Our junior and senior girls will be playing football. Although we are the visiting team, I have full confidence in our ability to take on the Tigers. We also have our blood drive. CTE and HOSA students are gearing up for the last blood drive of the year on April 22nd. We are partnering up with the American Red Cross, and they've already gotten a large amount of signups. For student government, we are working on our senior grad night. Our senior council has started planning our first Disneyland grad night since the class of 2019. We've already started deposits with almost 100 signups already. For sports, it is the start of the spring season, so we do have a lot going on. Our badminton has already started conditioning and ladders for their first game on the 31st. Our track and field has had their first invite at Edison and had a practice meet today at Tokay. Our boys volleyball is having their first game today as we speak against Lathrop. Our baseball is three games in and facing Weston Ridge tomorrow. And lastly, we have our esports, creating a Valorant and Rocket League teams for upcoming tournaments. Thank you, and that's what's happening at McNair so far.
Great, thank you. Board comments?
Ladies, we're getting closer to graduation. We're wondering if you've heard anything from your schools that you're applying to.
Great. So I have been accepted into CSU Fullerton, San Jose State University, and Sac State so far, and also UOP with a Regent Scholarship. So I am looking forward to more decisions this month.
That's great.
I applied to 4 schools and I got into all 4 of them, and I have made my decision. I will be attending University of Nevada in Reno.
Oh, wonderful. Congratulations. Great. Any other?
Yes, I just want to comment, Tokay doing a good job of articulation with your feeder schools. I like that because those little freshmen that come in, to this new high school are very timid like this. When they have a little experience coming in there and your leadership includes them, so happy. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments from the board? Great. Thank you both. Again, you're welcome to stay as long as you can. I know you probably have homework and things, so we appreciate your input. Moving on, Dr. Washer.
Thank you, President McFarland, members of the board. I have some things to share with you. First of all, I want to congratulate Tokay High School's robotics team for being selected to represent the district at the Northern California Regional Championship of the Robotics Education and Competition Foundation. The manager of the foundation commented that throughout the robotics competition season, the Tokay High students demonstrated perseverance through teamwork and creativity in their engineering design process. I think we have a picture to share with you. Kevin Bassaril and Sean Goody are the two team members that built the state competition bot. Tokay's robotics team is led by physics teacher Ryan Heinrich. So congratulations to Tokay. Also want to congratulate Lodi High and Mr. Kahn and his team and Chelsea Von Geer for a fabulous ribbon cutting at Lodi High School. I want to thank our board members and community members and staff for joining us for that celebration. I also want to recognize the students in the culinary program at McNair High School and teacher Matthew Owens for providing the delicious treats for that event. That was a special treat to have students in our district prepare that for the Lodi High celebration. I want to thank our board members, staff, and community members for participating in the Got Kids fundraising event. I don't have numbers yet, but it had to have been a successful event. It's lots of people, lots of good food, lots of good fun. Very generous community supporting that foundation, so thank you to all for that.
Lots of expensive desserts.
Yeah. Thanks to our staff members, many of whom are out in the audience, yes. Thank you for that. And I do want to make a couple comments. I know that we are all aware of what the governor has announced, that the mask mandate at schools will end at the end of the day on March 11th. We are on break at that time when it goes into effect. So, of course, we will return after the break with choice after our spring break for students and staff at the school sites. We know that the board has been very clear about your position and your stance about masks, that you are following the mandate because it is a mandate, not because it is a choice that you are making. And when it does become a choice on that date, after we come back, I have no reason to believe that this district would choose a mask mandate when it is not mandated by the state. So I know there was a public comment about that. We've also had a couple emails about that there will be no recommendation from staff and no indication from our Board of Education that that will be the case in Lodi Unified. The board has made it clear that they are doing this and look forward to the time when the mandate will be released, and will release the mandate as soon as possible. So as soon as possible will be that March 12th date. So I want to reassure everyone that that is not something that the board will choose to do. The board has been very clear that this is something that they had to do because of the state order, and that is the only reason. That this is not something that the board has been supportive, especially in the recent times. The governor's announcement, although it did put a light at the end of the tunnel, it was frustrating for many of us, including our board members, that there was that 2-week time frame rather than immediate release of the mandate. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Washer. Moving on to consent agenda A.
Madam President?
Yes.
In light of what Dr. Washer was saying, I'd like to follow up with some comments. In light of the recent decisions by Governor Newsom regarding the mask mandate and usage, I'm appalled at the state in their, in my opinion, and I do have some concerns. It doesn't make much sense to me why it wasn't March 1st, extremely frustrating to me. And I can't see for the life of me how 11 days makes any difference whatsoever. It's very inappropriate in my opinion. It is hypocritical, frustrating, and downright disgusting. It is wrong to force kids to wear masks. And if children's parents choose to send their children to school with masks, yes, absolutely, you have that right and ability. If you choose as the parents not to have your child wear a mask at school, you should have that choice also. I'm just hoping beyond hope that March 11th actually does come to fruition. It's been extended twice for children, and I guess seeing is believing. We've recently seen a lot of examples of hypocrisy of our elected officials at large events with tens of thousands of people in them. And it's unfortunate that they don't wear masks. All the while, they're requiring our children to wear masks in school. Newsom had to use intimidation. And I have a letter right here from the state, and what I'm saying is within this letter, how it sends the liability, all the liability, for their decision square in the laps of the school districts and the school boards personally, and to even go farther, uses, I guess, what I would term extortion to our teachers, in that if they don't enforce their rules, they have a likelihood of getting their credential revoked. Unbelievable. If your decisions are so good, you wouldn't have to use intimidation or extortion to have those things come through. You know, when we're supposedly in an emergency that lasts for 2 years, one of the things that people look for is leadership, and putting all of that responsibility and liability on another agency or another group of people for what you do is completely inappropriate. So I'm hoping that the state does follow through with their release of the mask mandate. Our children have paid a heavy price for the last 2 years' decisions, a heavy price. And that is just intolerable to me. I'm hoping beyond hope again that when the mask mandates are over, that we work together, find a way together to repair the damage that has been caused to our children. It's what we must do as adults. So thank you for your comments, Dr. Washer. I appreciate them, and I look forward to getting rid of this ridiculous mask mandate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heberly. Any other board comments?
Question.
Yes.
Real quick, Dr. Washer, the comment was made tonight, rightfully so too, about parents on campus. Are you going to look into that as well?
Yes, Mr. Neely, members of the board, we will.
Okay. Let us know as soon as you can, please.
Great, thank you. Kathy, is there any action that we need to take before the 11th, or will this?
No, there's no action you need to take. You have made it clear in your resolutions and actions that you will release, that we will follow the mandates, and as soon as possible will not have the mask, and so that is as soon as possible. As Mr. Heberly said,
So as soon as
barring
possible.
any other surprises.
So as soon as possible would mean
For us, it would be after spring break, because the 12th falls on the spring break.
That was my question. So we will be communicating with our families and parents
We did send one message out, we will
Okay.
continue to communicate.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Moving on to consent agenda A. Thank you, Mr. Heberly, for your comments. I appreciate them. Consent agenda A. Does anyone from the public or the board wish to pull any consent agenda items?
Madam President,
Yes,
I would like to pull item A3.
A3, okay. Anyone else? I would,
A1?
A1. Who said that? Michelle. Sorry, Michelle, I didn't see back there.
That's okay.
Okay, so would we like to vote on
Madam
A?
President, I move that we approve the rest of routine agenda A.
Thank you, Mr. Nava and Mr. Neely for the second. Board comments on A2? No? Public comments on A2? Okay, I call for the, we're going to do a verbal vote, is that correct? Mr. Knexted, are you there?
Yes, I am.
We're doing a verbal vote on consent agenda A, A2.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Mr. Nava?
Aye.
Mr. Neely?
Aye.
Mr. Heberly?
Aye.
Sorry, Mr. Porter? And Mr. Freitas?
Aye.
A2 passes 7-0. A1, let's go back. Michelle? You're walking better tonight.
Thank you, President McFarland, members of the board. If you can, through the president, on item number 2, on the contracts for air tutors, do we have a number of students that will be serving, and are we outsourcing because we couldn't get teachers on site to do tutoring?
Is that a question?
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Washer, would you like to take that? I would love if we can get those questions ahead of time, just so that you have answers, and that way you'll be able to ask additional information, if that works for you. Dr. Washer?
Thank you, President McFarland, members of the board. I do not have numbers at this time. We can certainly get that to you. I do know that in the past, when we've used companies for tutoring, they have been available pretty much 24/7. There have been students who have used them at midnight, all hours, which is not something that has been available through district staff.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the after-hours program? The name doesn't sound familiar, I'm sorry.
I don't know about numbers.
Mr. Young.
Mr. Young, if you wanted to.
What was the, I'm sorry.
How many students will this serve, and is this the after-school?
Is this
Air tutors?
air tutors? Every school's using air tutors. Was that the, I'll have to get back to you on that information, I'm sorry.
No, thank you, that's okay. Michelle, would you like to send Mr. Young an email? And could you copy me on that email also?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from the board? Any other additional comments?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you for the motion from Mr. Heberly and the second from Mr. Neely. We're going to start with Gary. We're voting on A1.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Nava.
Aye.
Mr. Neely.
Aye.
Mr. Porter.
Aye.
Mr. Heberly.
Aye.
Mr. Freitas.
Aye.
A1 passes 7-0. Moving on to A3. Both of you did? Okay. Who wants to go first? Mr. Heberly is cuter than you. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. When we had the report item on the 9-12 math curriculum and the K-8 curriculum, it seemed to me, and it's pretty clear that at that time the board was okay, obviously, with the K-8 math curriculum, but they were not okay with the 9-12 curriculum. And I'm actually surprised to see it on the agenda when the consensus was, for the report item, was astounding and clear that the 9-12 math curriculum was not interested, the board was not interested in approving the 9-12 math curriculum. So be that as it may, I just wanted to let everybody know and remind everybody what our intention was with the 9/12 math curriculum. So that's why I will be voting no for that.
Thank you, Mr. Heatherly. Mr. Porter?
I agree with Mr. Heberly, but I'm more concerned about the process. I do believe that there were math teachers involved. It came down to a 50-50 vote. I did receive a letter from one of the individuals that teaches math at Bear Creek, who pointed out that they did not like how the decision went at Bear Creek, which would make it a not 50-50, it would make it more 75-25 against. And then with that, it was brought to Curriculum Council, where I believe that it was almost a unanimous vote not to pass this forward, that we would stay status quo, and it came forward anyway to us. Then it gets to us as an agenda item, is that correct? Mm-hmm. And
Report.
here, as we went through it, I believe that was Mr. Freitas who said, what does staff say? And staff, it was quoted that staff approved. So we have math teachers who are in the trenches deciding that they do not want this curriculum, but technically with the email of majority. We had Curriculum Council who overwhelmingly approved not to move forward with it. It was moved forward. But we had staff, whoever staff is, approve it. And I struggle with that. I believe in collaborative decisions. And the most effective type of leadership and how to get things done is through collaboration. And I struggle with the fact that it's even here tonight. I think this goes to show the many flaws in terms of communication. If you want to have teachers that have a hook into what they're doing, they have to be on board with their choices that they made and support from staff on their choices. So for those people that are teaching math, I think we need to support them because they're the ones that are doing it. I don't know how many math teachers are in staff, but I'm going to support those teachers that are. And as far as the coaches go, thank you. But again, I want to know from the people that are actually teaching. Plus the curriculum left out over 300 kids at one high school. And why are we purchasing it? So that's where I'm at. I'm also a little bit wary of, and we touched on it, the part of the new curriculum they want us to approve, most of it was online. For each student was then pushed by the pace of the computer. And I have a hard time with it. There's no greater resource than a teacher-student interaction. There's no greater interaction between a teacher and a student. So I'm going to be voting a very hard no on this, and I think we need to reevaluate how we bring forward materials like this after staff and curriculum council have denied them coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Any other comments?
President McFarland? I have some questions for Dr. Solly, if he's available.
Sure.
Maybe it was late in the evening or what, but why is staff recommending the change in curriculum?
An opportunity to upgrade our curriculum to a more current program with digital access for students, and to utilize some ESSER funds to lighten the load in purchasing it, and also looking at math data over the past 6 years, 7 years, and not seeing growth. An opportunity to change something to try and get different results.
So the current textbook or program that we've had in place is it's been there for 6 years?
My understanding is it started in the 2015 school year.
Okay, so that's at least 6 years. Even I can kind of do that math. And how are we doing with it?
Well, as was reported, I think 3 meetings ago, our data is relatively flat. Granted, COVID impacted everything the last couple of years, but our trajectory wasn't up, and so we're doing with it, but unfortunately it's not getting strong results.
Okay, so I guess in simple terms, our math scores are bad?
Yes.
Disappointing?
Yes.
Okay. And part of this obviously was probably somewhat to do with the pandemic. Is that correct?
Well, going with the longitudinal data from the 2015 report that we gave you a couple weeks ago, the trend wasn't upward.
So, and then you also pointed to a second thing, that time is of the essence in this, and that there's ESSER funds?
Yes, we can utilize ESSER funding for this acquisition in an effort to both recover learning loss and simply just improve instruction.
Okay. And to what amount would the ESSER funds assist us?
The high school purchase is in the $2.5 million range, and we could cover likely about $2 million of that with ESSER funding. Some of the rationales that and we're still working this out with Ed Services managing the ESSER funds. The requirement to receive the service technically wouldn't be complete in the digital component because you can't receive the service until you get to that school year. So we're still, in fact, I just this afternoon had another updated email from Ed Service to clarify that. I think they're still reevaluating if we could just purchase fully up front, and assuming that the contract is committed, therefore the funds are expended.
I'm sorry, could you?
Well, in many cases, with federal funding, you need to receive funds or product before the expiration of the funding. And we are proposing to them, or proposing them the conundrum of a subscription of a digital resource. You can't consume that service until the contract date ends. So I bring that up because we may need to prorate that component of a purchase so that after the ESSER funding deadline, then we would use additional funding service. But the question that came to me this afternoon was, traditionally, do you buy up front? And the answer is yes, we buy up front.
Okay. And this will cost us $2.4 million, but it will only cost us the $0.4 million or $400,000 because we can contribute this to ESSER or one-time COVID funding?
Well, as I was saying, if they see it the way I hope they'll see it, we'd pay the full expenditure with ESSER. If not, we'd in likelihood pay about $2 million. The digital component of the services, the ongoing services that we can't receive by August, September of 2024, we would prorate. So 80% of it, 75–80% of it would be paid for with ESSER. If they can agree to the understanding that we're purchasing an adoption up front, as we traditionally have, then we can pay the full amount.
And now the other additional thing is, with this new purchase, we'd be getting a digital component?
Yes, there's the digital textbook, which we currently have in a PDF format, but we would also have digital assessments and digital resources for some individualized instruction on the student's part.
Now, even though it's individualized instruction on the student's part, what is the role of the teacher in this?
I agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Porter. Without a good teacher, we're not going to have good results. But this puts some tools in their hands so that they can provide access or see results on a more individualized basis. At a high school, it's certainly pretty difficult to be finally in tuned with 150 students coming through your classroom door every day, where the computer can do that, and then you need to digest that later on what they call a teacher dashboard as they look through their student performance and see where their holes and gaps are, where they're excelling. So the resource is available to, I believe, enhance the teacher's classroom instruction because that work is done for them by the computer.
The other thing also, my understanding with digital textbooks is when they create an opportunity to have immediate updates?
Correct. There's, most publishers, as I see them now, are coming out with consumable student books, because in order to match their online components and to update, the book is renewed annually with a brand new copy of a consumable text, because the companion online course has already been updated and is continually updated.
And Dr. Sally, based upon your training and experiences, is your opinion that it would be in the best interest of our students for us to change to the new curriculum?
Well, I believe, as I mentioned, that we need to see our scores improve, and I believe it's the only component we can change that would have a significant change in terms of what we do to see different results, and that's my main reason for the recommendation.
Well, yeah, I got to tell you, President McFarland, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. And it appears that we haven't been satisfied with our test results. To expect these things to change, it makes no sense. I know one of our board members is full on board with a digital curriculum, and that checks off this box. And 50% of our teachers want this, and we're literally doing this for free so that we would be in a position when the new curriculums come out in 2 years, that were we unsatisfied with this, that we would get a free pass and be able to use our curriculum funds for this. I don't know why we wouldn't do this. So I'm going to be in favor of this motion, this item, and I would move to approve item OAI3.
Thank you, Mr. Freitas. Before we get there, I know Mr. Porter has a question, and I also have a question. Don't run away. Do you think one curriculum fits all of our schools? Sounds like we've got a vast difference, and maybe one size doesn't fit all. Is that conceivable that we could have 1, 2, or even 3 different programs running at once based on the needs of the schools?
It's conceivable. You know, that's the whole argument against centralized and decentralized. There are rationale for both. It potentially opens the door for that to be true in all subject areas, and we have a real menagerie of curricula. And as students transfer from Lodi to Tokay and vice versa, move about the district, they may be experiencing very disparate curriculum path.
No, not being a teacher myself, I'm curious, and I know we have a math teacher coming up, so maybe they'll be able to enlighten me. Is it possible that if we had more than one curriculum, that as the needs changed, maybe the curriculums at the schools would change? Am I just off base here?
It's difficult to change frequently.
Right.
The traditional model is the 7-8 adoption cycle. As I mentioned earlier, publishers are transitioning to be more agile themselves. Previous days, it was a massive investment to get all these hardcover books in your classroom. They are transitioning to consumable and digital editions, so they can then transition to a shorter term and reduce their costs on an annual basis, a subscription type service. So we're somewhere in the middle at this point with curriculum adoptions. But I mean, certainly it's feasible.
I guess where I'm standing is I'm leaning towards no, simply because I think you have a lot of knowledge, and I think our teachers have a lot of knowledge, and I think we need more time to share the knowledge between us. I do know the ESSER funds have an expiration date, and so I would like us to do something, but maybe this is not, in my opinion, the correct one, because I want to make sure that there's clear dialogue and communication before a decision is made. And while it's very important for the people that are using it to have a very hefty hand in the decision, I know it's ultimately your decision, and you're going to present what's best to us. So with that, I'm going to turn to Mr. Porter, because he had another question.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. Mr. Neely, I'll be quick. One was, I believe it was maybe a month ago, were we not looking at test scores?
Yes, I believe it was.
And did we not say that given COVID, you know, don't worry, yada, yada, we had a lot of students, the county didn't. But didn't we say, oh, look, math's not doing that bad at the high school level? Wasn't that part of the, because if I remember correctly, wasn't that found in the data?
I believe it was relative to ELA, it wasn't doing as bad
But I mean,
overall.
when we looked at the county and we looked, I interrupted you, but we looked at the county and everybody else, our math scores at the high school level were, wow, during the pandemic, which we were told to throw out, math scores weren't that bad. Now tonight we approved K through 8. And as we all know, math is sequential. You build a foundation. If we change that route, which all the teachers want to do, on the K through 8, I believe you had almost 100% of those teachers say, let's take this curriculum. But at the high school level, suddenly we're talking about dollars, not about what teachers think that actually teach math. And I really have a hard time with that. Even though the data showed that our teachers were doing very well during COVID at the high school level. Would you not agree with me?
I would agree, but I guess it is somewhat relative. Our math scores are still below 50%.
Correct, but I won't belabor the point. But I don't think this decision should be based on dollars. It should be based on what our teachers feel in curriculum council. Those are the people that are in the trenches. So I want to just reiterate that. And I also want to reiterate that those test scores for the high school teachers in math during COVID were the only bright spot during that pandemic for our score. Now, Mr. McFarland, thank you for letting me ask.
President McFarland, if we have an opportunity to do better for our students, why are we not taking that opportunity? And that's...
I appreciate your point, but I have 2 board members that have yet to get to speak and would like Mr. Novick to have. Mr. Neely.
You know, I've watched these adoptions come in over the last 16 years, and I've watched them come up. Curriculum council, and people will tell us that this is the greatest curriculum for English or math or social studies that ever was, and then 5 or 6 years later, I hear that the curriculum that we have is the pits. We need to change to something else. The point being, the curriculum is nothing more than a tool. It's the teacher in the classroom that makes the difference. When I started at Creekside, a good friend of mine, Michael Naroka, great teacher, I mean great teacher. Didn't even pass out math books. He used it for himself as kind of a guide for the direction that we were going, and he did his own thing on it. And he always had the highest math scores. So it's kind of interesting. It's not about just the curriculum. Now, the nice thing about having a digital curriculum is that a good teacher who knows how to use digital technology can take that and run with it and make it their own. And possibly some of the problems that we have is that we have been remiss in training our teachers how to do that with the proper professional development and that kind of thing. I remember what wasn't too many years ago that we had, we were teaching American history out at Bear Creek. It was 2012 or something like that, and they were still referring to Senator Barack Obama instead of President Barack Obama. There was so the advantages of digital technology are incredible. They can be updated immediately. And not everybody's going to like that because a lot of people don't like change. They want a math book or a book to pass out. They want a handout to give out in class. And I'm sorry, we got that. We need to move forward. We need to start changing the way. We've got the technology now. We've got the infrastructure built. So now is the time to go ahead and push forward on this. I'm going to be supporting this for that reason. And I appreciate everything that you put in on this. And I understand the issues on this. I understand what people are saying. But we need to move forward and strongly support it. That's all.
Mr. Neely. Mr. Nava?
Yeah, I just have one real question. I know that it was 50% and 50% on the math choosing. How many math teachers, or was it full curriculum council involved with this particular choice?
The math adoption committee consisted of 9 high school math teachers. And when the vote was taken for the 50-50, each comprehensive high school had a vote. The curriculum council was presented with that data and asked which direction they would seek to go and recommend to the board. The curriculum council is a recommending body, so they don't actually approve or deny, they recommend. And when I brought this information to the board last week, that was the information I was providing. And while granted, I agree that half is the speakers were largely here speaking against, I happen to have spoken with many classroom teachers in our high schools who were in support of this. So I was bringing it forward simply to present that there is another 50% that isn't here speaking at the podium that was seeking to make a change. Now, why they chose not to come, I don't know. And I don't know about the Bear Creek conversation. I've had conversation with Bear Creek a number of times, and they were in support of a change. And again, whether this is, to Mr. Neely's point, there's no silver bullet in any of this. But as I mentioned to Mr. Freitas, it's an attempt to make a change. It's an opportunity to make a change. It's an opportunity and it's not about the money either, but there's money there to be spent on COVID-related issues. So all those factors play into bringing this tonight. And actually the reason it was brought forward tonight was that last week was an informational meeting, it wasn't an action meeting. And so giving the board an opportunity to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, it was brought forward.
Okay. The other thing is, how many teachers did you say were involved? You had
9 on the adoption committee.
9 of the 4 high schools?
Yes. Yes. All were invited to participate. The committee started their work during fall break, and so a lot of people were unable to attend. However, due to the substitute shortage, it was kind of our only option.
Okay, the reason I asked that because I understand some of the teachers said they were rushed to these meetings, and some of them couldn't make it because it was a rush meeting and we wanted to get something done. Is that correct?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say rushed. It was a short timeline. We started in September and we completed in January. Often adoptions take a couple more months. It was again in an effort to have something in the hands of the students next August, and so we wanted to get to the board in March so that ordering process could start, shipping could take place, and get things in hand, and professional development started in June.
I think you were asked this question, Dr. Sally. Is it a positive thing to change?
Not always.
I'm just thinking about this particular.
I thought that was a general question.
No, not
Is
general.
this a positive?
I'm talking about the math.
I wouldn't recommend it if I didn't think it was. And again, I agree. There's others who disagree with me, and that's why I'm bringing it forward to you. You have the decision.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Nava. I think we have some public comments. Gary? Oh, I'm sorry. Gary, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Do you have any comments? Thank you.
Well, it's pretty much been said, and I think Ms. Neely was very eloquent in his response. In my opinion, the curriculum is available, and the teacher in the classroom will always be able to use it and adapt that works best for the teacher and the student. So I will vote to approve this.
Thank you, Gary. Public comment. We have some people in the room.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Lori Betha. This is my 37th year as a classroom teacher, and my 13th at McNair High School. Tonight, I'm asking you to consider the precedent this vote is setting and the long-term consequences of its outcome. McNair High School entered the process in good faith. Our entire department spent 3 hours reviewing the curriculum of all 3 courses, Integrated 1, Integrated 2, and Integrated 3. We were told the math textbook adoption committee needed to come to a consensus. There was no discussion regarding what would happen if we didn't, even though we asked many times. When the consensus didn't happen, the adoption process went to the curriculum council anyway. The council heard both sides, and after careful consideration and deliberation, they voted to delay the 9-12 math adoption. Much to our surprise, the adoption vote was sent to you, the board, for approval. If you vote to adopt at this time, the message is being sent loud and clear that the only purpose of our many committees is to rubber stamp the district staff's predetermined outcome. It doesn't even matter if we give it that stamp of approval because it will move forward without us. We at McNair understand that you, the board and district staff, have the authority to impose curriculum upon us. If that happens, we will do our best with it, as we always do. However, I hope that you acknowledge this is a major change in procedure and protocol. As I said at the beginning, a top-down decision will set a major precedent and will fundamentally change how we do business. On a more personal note, if I thought for a single minute this curriculum was better than what we had already, I would go for it. I've been doing this a really long time. I've been through many of these processes. And I just don't see that it's better. Change for change's sake isn't progress. It is not moving forward. The online component, while it's great it's there, we hated it. It was not adaptive enough. It did not meet the needs of our students. An example being that if it gave you a problem, if you did not answer it the way they wanted you to answer it, it marked it wrong. That's a major fault. I could go into the weeds about the book, but I don't want to do that because that's really not your place, right? I mean, they're math textbooks. But you know, we're not miracle workers. What we would hope to see is to have a new curriculum come in K-8, give it time to take hold, allow us to look at major publishers. We were not able to look at any of them because they would not agree to update their stuff for free. Our current curriculum does have online textbooks, which they do update on a regular basis. It does have a Desmos link, which means they have online activities. We are not living in the dark ages. I have all kinds of notes that I wrote to myself while I was sitting there listening, and now I'm not sure which ones are the most important. I guess that's my highlight. There are other people who have to speak, and I'm sure they'll pick up anything I missed. So thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course. Yes.
Yeah, my question is, are you speaking for all the McNair math teachers?
Yes, I am. I have told them I'm being here tonight. We discuss this every week at our CPT meetings.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are several of us here tonight.
Mr. Haverly also has a
I have one for you too. You said the current curriculum has a digital component that they do update. Is that correct?
Yes, their online textbook gets updated whenever they feel it's necessary, and that's what we use. And there are online activities that all of us at McNair use. It links to a Desmos page where we do graphing and work with algebra tiles and so forth. So to say that we don't have it, I don't think it's true. I know it's not true.
Okay. Well, that was my question. When you were saying that, we're not going from textbook to textbook and digital because we already have textbook and digital.
Right. We do not have the artificial intelligence adaptive piece that is with the new textbook. And if I thought it was good, I'd be all for it, but I don't. I would rather wait and see what they have in 2 years when the major publishers come out with some of their own curriculum.
So you're saying delay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I was here last week, Ann King from Tokay High School, and I've been teaching for 30 years. I just came back because I was worried about this vote. One of the things, I said a lot of the same things that Mrs. Beffa said last week, but I wanted to touch on something that Mr. Freitas said. I have money burning a hole in my pocket doesn't mean I should spend it when it's not for the best use. And I think that is what has been driving this, so that we can get a book and spend money, but then that book is the book that, well, in 2 years when the new books come out, we're not going to get to look at them because they're just going to update, and that's the book we're going to keep because we're going to save our money, spend our money now. And we weren't given the opportunity to look at the big publishers because they didn't want to give us free books in 2 years, which who would want to, you know? And as I said at the last meeting, our from the county office, Jatinder Singh, I believe is her name, she has told districts, if you can wait, wait, because there's better stuff going to be coming out. The framework is going to be updated, and that, if we really want to have better curriculum, that's what I would do. I would wait and see what the changes bring. We do have the digital component, and also because we were very resourceful, thank you for complimenting our math teachers during the pandemic, we were very resourceful looking for online resources and have found some really great programs that we have put in place at our site to supplement what we have. They are great. They have videos, video instruction rather than just, you know, they can watch a video at home, they can see examples, they can do problems. We don't have an adaptive piece to it, but it's a very powerful program. And the kids actually that tried the adaptive one and have used this other program, they prefer the one that we have incorporated during this time. So it's not like we don't have any digital components. I just feel, like we said, I'm okay with change. I had to change a lot in the last 2 years, a lot, more than I ever wanted to, but I did it. But just to change because I can spend some money and I get some fancy things, if it's not the best thing, I don't want to do it. I'd rather keep my old car. My old car runs great, I'm making it work, we're hanging in there with our scores. You know, why just throw it out when it doesn't have the backbones and some of the things we need in there to be successful. So that's why Tokay, and I'm speaking for Tokay, they all know I'm here, we don't think it's the best move. We want to keep what we have and go for it. But if you really want to spend money on math, spend it on high school math and get us some more things to help us there, because that's 30% of our population that's coming in at undergrade level, and that's where we should put the money. Until we fix that class and that content, you're not going to see growth. A third of your students are coming into high school below grade level. So do the K-8 adoption and see what happens. So,
thank you.
My 2 cents.
Can you come back, please, for just a minute?
And
Mr. Heavily has a question.
I just want to clarify, when you say high school math, you're talking about the high school math course.
The high school math course, which is a grade level, it's an 8th grade level course, and this year I'm teaching 3 sections of it, and I will tell you that it's an 8th grade level course, but my students are anywhere from 3rd to 8th grade level. I mean,
and that's the thing about math, well, probably anything else. You have to provide where your students are.
Yes.
And if that's not going to change, and you say that's 30 of your students,
then what's going to change?
Yeah. So again, that hopefully will be resolved in two-ish years.
As the elementary school goes through their new curriculum, then hopefully it will transfer. But to just, you know, we're still not addressing that. And if you want to see our scores go up, you know, that's a big place where it needs to happen, is those kids coming in.
Thanks, Ms. King, sorry.
Yeah.
Mr. Porter has a
Ms.
question.
King,
Yes.
the curriculum that we're supposedly voting on tonight, well, not supposedly, but voting on tonight, that curriculum doesn't address the issue that you and Mr. Heberly were just talking about, is that correct?
No, it doesn't have any of that level of course. It starts at integrated 1.
So as far as helping all students, as we've heard here tonight, it's not.
No,
Thank you.
it will not be.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, President McFarland, board members, Dr. Washer. Thank you for having me back. I'm Jen Castle, and I am not a math teacher, but I'm on Curriculum Council. I am really glad that Ann just ended with that. That's 300 kids at Tokay that do not have a set curriculum. I mean, that's significant. I'd also like to, Mr. Freitas, you said if we have the opportunity to do better for our kids, and I think that's noble, that's great, but you don't do that without teachers. And Mr. Neely, I appreciate your add-on. However, you have Ann King speaking for all the teachers at Tokay. You have Lori Beffas speaking for all the teachers at McNair. How does this happen without those teachers on board, right? You need buy-in. And Mr. Nava, you asked about Curriculum Council, and I'm so glad you did, because I'm a very, very proud member of that group. And I spoke about that last time, but I'm gonna get way more specific about it right now. We have 19 voting members on Curriculum Council. 14 of them are LEA members, teachers. One of them is LPPA, and 4 administrative voting members. But all the vice principals from all of the comprehensive high schools are there every meeting. We're either in a big Zoom or we're in this very room, and we do a lot of really important curriculum work. I am gonna take this off and say this to the people watching on YouTube, that what we do at that meeting matters. And that is the collaboration that good school districts look to in order for buy-in, okay? That these are teachers in Stockton and Lodi, elementary, secondary. What happened with the elementary adoption, that's awesome when that happens. When you have consensus and everybody's on board and excited, I'm so glad that vote went that way. This is not coming off the same way. And just because it's financially sound does not mean that your people are gonna back it. And I think that that's really important. We have another Curriculum Council meeting in April, and I'm telling you, it's gonna be hard to go back to that group. Like, what are we doing there? What are we doing there? The vote, this is the part I haven't told you. 19 voting members, 18 voted to not do this. 1 voted to proceed. That is not 50-50 at all, and that is a cross-section of our district that voted very overwhelmingly to not move forward with this. So I would like to represent for the people that go to those meetings and donate their time and their expertise that they matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do we have anybody from Bear Creek or Lodi here from the math department that could speak to that?
Is there anyone in our
Anybody
audience?
from those 2 schools? Nobody?
No.
I have to, you know, my pet peeve is the curriculum council, if they review all those things, I mean, I'm not in the trenches, I just support them, that's all, but proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Nava. Mr. Freitas.
Dr. Washer, would it be possible for us to do the new curriculum at the 2 high schools that want it and leave the old curriculum at the 2 high schools that don't want it, since we have a 50-50 vote?
Mr. Freitas, members of the board, yes, you may make that decision.
So, Dr. Wash, President McFarland, why don't I withdraw my current motion, since it hasn't had a second, and now move that we adopt the new curriculum.
Can I say something, or no?
Just go, let him finish his and then we'll.
Move that we adopt the new curriculum for the Bear Creek and the Lodi high schools. That one system.
Thank you, Mr. Freitas.
It's just a reminder that the students haven't had any.
The students have not got to speak yet. I guess we're coming back to public comment. Okay.
I just want to add to that, if you're going to do that, you may want to ask all the teachers in the departments, because we need to confirm that the vote that was given during the adoption committee was truly a vote from the entire department, and not a vote from the representatives who were there. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. And I think, there you are, Michelle.
Mr. Freitas, back to Ms. Freitas, members of the board, I want to make a comment on that if that is a concern, the board may wish to give that option to those schools at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Washer. Michelle.
Thank you. That's a slippery slope, I think, adopting a curriculum, especially within the movement of students from one high school to another. I like the idea of going back to the group before making the decision and making sure that you do have a vote from each of those high schools that want that for the adoption. To split that in the district, how is that going to affect a student that goes from, say, Tokay to Bear Creek within their high school career, whether it's within a year? That would be very challenging for students, and I'm sure they can give some input on that, but I maybe going back to all 4 sites and asking them before we make this decision, because it is a lot of money, it is a big decision, and then what's going to happen with those other 2 sites? Are we going to come back once the frameworks are adopted and the new publishers have published after that, and only those 2 schools that voted against it would get the program, or would all 4 be able to get it? So there are some other implications down the line that we need to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to go ahead and did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I do.
Hold on just a minute.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Is there a deadline that we have to hit on this? Okay. Is it possible for us to table this particular item? And let's explore some of these options that are being discussed tonight. And then we can take a look at it again, because there's obviously some very strong feelings about this in certain areas. I don't know that that's the case overall, but maybe we could look at this in a different light and get some people up here and let's talk about it. But so I'm gonna make a motion that we table this particular item for tonight, and let's set to bring it back first meeting in May.
Thank you for doing my job,
I
Mr.
second
Newman.
that motion.
Only, Dr. Sully, can we have this available as a class first week in May? If we decide on first week of May, or do you need something earlier? When you said time is not of the essence.
Purchasing and that.
Well, yeah, what comes into play is the purchasing, the shipping, the acquisition, and all that. To have it in place for August 1st might be challenging. If it's certainly scaled back to a site or 2 sites, that would be an easier lift. Not as many things to move, but we, again, as I mentioned earlier, this is an opportunity. This is not we're not under a deadline that we have to have this done. So it's just posed as an opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Sally.
So, Mr. Neely, what about April?
Could we hear the rest of our comments, our public? Can we hear the rest of our board comments
Of
and
course.
then
Yes.
our public comments? Go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tammy Naylor. I'm a math instructional coach. This is my 2nd year in that position for 6 through 12. I attempted to remain quiet over here because I feel that I put the information up and then it's up to other teachers and board members to make the ultimate decision. I would like to caution, however, that if we go down a road of allowing 2 sites, 1 site, every site to choose their own curriculum for math, then it will be history, then it will be English. It is within your purview to do so, but I think it takes more than a proposal at this meeting to consider before going down that road. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
After carefully listening to all of the speakers, I just want to say that I know for a fact that Ann King is a phenomenal teacher and knows her stuff. I know that from being a colleague and from knowing her as a teacher of my children, and I would trust her. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Heberly. Okay, so we're at a crossroads. Students. Well, I realize we have a motion, but we have not heard from our student rep yet. Would you like to weigh in?
Yes, please. Thank you, President McFarland, members of the board, Dr. Washer. Second period and sixth period were my favorite classes. My freshman and sophomore year, those were the periods that I had math. I honestly couldn't even tell you what period I had math in during distance learning because it all just blended together. And you know, I just couldn't imagine doing more digital. You know, next year I know it's really not going to affect me too much. But I just don't want the kids below me to not enjoy math anymore. I really don't, and I feel that all the digital will. And so as the voice of Tokay and, you know, hearing Ms. King speak, hearing Ms. Castle speak, we need to do what's best for the kids, and I'm a kid, and in my opinion, this isn't what's best for them.
Thank you.
I would also like to say that I do not think that this is best for McNair or any of the other schools either. In support of the teachers that came here, I have been taught by them for my past 3 years of high school. They're amazing, and I trust that whatever they decide for their students is best. I also believe that we should wait until 2024 to see the framework of the main publishers, and so I believe we should scale back and seek more options. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so, Mr. Freitas, you made a motion. Are you rescinding your motion?
I don't have a second, so my motion is rescinded all by itself.
Making sure that it was still out there.
But I appreciate the question.
So if we,
Mr. Neely also put a motion on the table. Do we need a motion?
second.
And a second by Mr. Numbert.
If you, President McFarland, members of the board, if you table it, it comes back the next meeting, I would suggest you postpone it to a future meeting, unless you want it at the next meeting.
So by postponing it, we're giving Dr. Solly and Curriculum Council and everybody a chance to go back and do what they do, to bring something
That's correct.
feasible
I
to
believe
us.
Mr. Neely's intent was that we look into some of these other ideas and options more closely. I don't want to speak for you, I believe that was your intent.
Right. The motion is to address this at a later time, after some more research has been done. We need to find out about different high schools. I'm hearing conflicting stories here, and I'm sure it's a communications kind of thing, and I'd just like a chance to have that cleared up before we address the full motion.
Postponement would be right there.
Postponement would be better to the table, like we wouldn't bring it back next meeting.
Correct.
Because that's
a study session
Study
anyway.
session.
So a table would bring it back on March 29th. I think that's the next regular meeting. But I think that your intent was to give a little more time. So a postponement means that we can bring it back at a later time.
So when we're referring to bringing it back, I want to make sure I'm clear. That doesn't mean we're bringing back necessarily an adoption. It's a bringing it back to give us information that was discussed.
That's up to you. You tell us.
Okay.
It depends if it goes on a report item or an action item.
An action item does not, you do not have to take action on an action item.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We have an issue before us to vote on. It has been gone through the teachers. It's gone through Curriculum Council. It's now presented before us. We vote on this, and if we want to give direction, then we look at other math curricula or something like that, fine. But we're also having 300 students at Tokay, multiply that before, 1,200 students that are not being affected by this. So we should vote on this, kill it, and ask Dr. Silla to come back and talk to the math teachers and get their input on maybe something that would help our math students as well as our core math students. Is that correct?
I would concur with that assessment.
I would like to see us take a vote on this and then ask to go back to the drawing board and come back with more communication and something that matches. Because what I'm hearing from math teachers, from Curriculum Council, the wires are getting crossed in there someplace, and I feel like we don't have enough to make a decision at this juncture. Board, are we in agreement on that?
I motion that we vote on that.
We have a motion and a second already from Mr. Neely, and I think Mr. Neely's motion is,
Has been seconded.
Mr. Nava has.
Mr. Nava has seconded it, but they were trying to clarify what they were motioning and seconding. We didn't have it
And we
clear.
clarified that.
It's a postponement.
It's a postponement.
Postponement.
And I think that would work, and 2 schools seem to want this, and we can put this out to determine if that's true or not.
So you would like us to vote on a postponement versus voting on the actual?
And I'm in favor of the postponement, yes.
We have to vote on it.
You have a motion and a second, Madam President, so that would be a vote.
That would be a vote? Okay, so a vote yes would mean to postpone, a no would mean kill the motion to postpone, and we would go back to...
Correct.
Got it. Okay, so we are going to start a verbal vote with Mr. Connexid. Do you understand what you're voting for?
I believe I do.
Great.
I'm going to vote yes to postpone.
Great. Mr. Nava?
Yes.
Mr. Neely?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
No.
Mr. Heatherly?
No.
Mr. Freitas?
Yes.
And it comes to me, and I would also like to vote no. Postponement passes 4-3. And board, I'm sorry, I apologize, students, I didn't get your, I apologize.
It's okay. It's a no for me.
No from me as well.
Thank you, I apologize. So we are postponing, and later it will come back to us as an agendized item later, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then we let the A3, I'm sorry, we don't vote on that, correct? I want to make sure we're doing this.
You just did.
We did, okay, just want to make sure we don't have to do
You
anything.
just voted on A3.
Right, okay, as a postponement. Just checking. Other action items, OA1, proposed revision to Rule 6142.7, physical education and activity to identify athletic exemption. Dr. Sully.
Good evening, President Freitas, members of the board, Dr. Washington.
President who?
Oh, President McFarland.
It's okay.
I sit down, start that over. The discussion last meeting about the PE exemption and the PFT test. We have before you crafted some language in the rule component of the policy addressing this PFT exemption. And on the last pages, you will see 8 bullets that were added to the rule to allow, I would say, the vast majority of our students to receive an athletic exemption provided they successfully participate in a sport. And that would, I do want to point out though, the first bullet on that under other exemptions on page 3 is language straight out of Ed Code, which my reading doesn't include club sports. You could add a bullet that speaks to club sports if you wish. You could strike any of these bullets or approve this as presented. And again, I think it was discussed last week in the interest of time, this was proposed to provide an action ASAP for the maximum input. Very strange because that's contrary to the State Board of Education action because you can't calculate scores without including gender as a factor. This morning when I got to work, it doesn't address club sports at this point, doesn't address marching bands at this point, but in the interest of expediency, what was brought forward to at least bring an athletic exemption. It is apparently now possible by CDE communication that we could calculate scores. I would caution we'd be in conflict with the State Board of Education. And I'm very puzzled why the CDE is sending out 2 different communications that conflict with the State Board, but I just provide that as additional information. I'm honestly not clear on that, on the conclusions of what that really means.
Huh, why don't we pick the one we want and go with it?
Well, so, I mean, that's apparently what the CDE is offering. I would propose that your by doing so, potentially undoing what the state board is doing. And I mean, again, we've got two state entities that seem to be in conflict. And so it would be your call.
We're legal, all right?
And I thought this was.
The rule part would be in alignment with Ed Code. The latest information I'm proposing to you is still, tomorrow may change, I'm not sure.
President McFarland, members of the board, so tonight, the action item is about the athletic waiver, not the new information.
Correct.
What you could do if you are in favor and like the athletic waiver part, you could approve that and then give us direction to move forward with this other piece or get more information about this other piece. So I don't want to confuse the two on what is on the agenda tonight. I'm going to make a prediction because of the timing that our student comments that we sent to the board may have caused them to reflect a little on what they did.
Wonderful. Okay, board. Yes.
Can I have the floor?
It's all yours, Mr. Nava.
Okay, Dr. Sally, we're not doing right now anything to those people that are not athletes but are good physical specimens that can pass the test and get the exemption. We're not doing anything for them, right?
This rule would not help them.
No. And how many do we have that have been exempt like that they're not athletes? Do you have a number?
I've been informed that typically it's around the 1,000 student range that apply for the exemption. I don't know of that number, how many are athletes and how many are just students.
It matters because, you know, I'm not an athlete. I just want to get the exemption so I can take an AP class on my own time, okay?
Right.
So I passed the test, but I don't qualify.
So as I mentioned, there seem to be some words from the CDE that we could calculate a score. I think we might run into the conflict of our first non-binary student who steps forward that we can't provide a score for because we can't calculate male or female into the scoring. That is the whole reason this came about. It was an equity issue in the first place. The state realized that that's inequitable, that student can't get the score, and therefore they made the changes to the exam, the fitness exam.
So basically, they said we can figure it out, but if the district can figure it out, go ahead. Is basically what they said.
Yes, go for it.
Mr. Neely.
Okay, first of all, this is a board rule, and we can change a board rule every meeting if we want. So this can be said that this is a beginning on this, and we can move forward, and I do think that we need to look at something else. Also, it was a few years ago, we had the argument about how about soccer players that play for a club instead of a school. Shouldn't they get credit for it? That may be something we want to look into. And I would assume that those that are good enough to do that would also pass a regular PT test. And
I'm trying to provide you with Ed Code supported.
I got you. I read the minutes from the State Board of Education, and I was just amazed that they could pass something like that. I don't think they really thought that thing through because it's absolutely ridiculous. So I say we pass this, but we also pick up get a resolution and send it to the State Board of Education. We contact our local legislators and we say, hey, look, this doesn't work and we need to get this changed. And then when we get it changed, we come back and change it. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Neely.
If that's a motion, I'm seconding it.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, that's a motion.
It isn't, it is now.
Clarification?
We have more comments.
Mr. Gifford.
No, go ahead.
No, he didn't have one. He was just.
Yeah, my clarification would be that this does not address club sports, correct? Huh?
Correct.
Correct.
So then if we decided and gave you direction to look into examples of how they can get exemption for club sports, we can amend this at that time to include sports. What do we need to do then in order for us to come up with our own exemption scoring system so that our kids could file exemptions now? Because what I said last time we talked about it, it's two issues, now and in the future. This does future, but it doesn't do now. Is that how you see it?
This does now for our current athletes. That's what it does now for.
Right. So that's why I want to make sure that if we do pass this, we can adjust, add the club to that, and then in a separate direction, get some scores together or an exemption test together so that our kids can take that exemption.
So there's two things I think you're asking there. The first one is the club, and a hurdle to get around the club issue, or around or over, under, through, I'm not sure which. If it's our sports, we have a credentialed teacher, either as potentially a coach or an athletic director, that can sign off on that exemption. Club sport, I don't know the resolve to finding a credentialed teacher to sign off on verification of that participation. That's my current understanding what we need to do. If we can find language that allows others, quote unquote, others to sign off on that exemption, then we could certainly pursue that. The other piece you were referring to is the creating our own scores, which again, the CDE seems to have implied district can do, but they don't support it. If I may, I actually have the agenda item from the State Board of Education in January. I'd like to read just a short paragraph here. And it speaks to there are no healthy fitness zones for the non-binary student. While a non-binary student may receive raw scores, the non-binary student will not receive the healthy fitness zone scores because it requires the inclusion of gender, and therefore will not be included in the LEA's aggregated scores, will not have the opportunity to satisfy the criteria for the exemption for PE exemption, and then they go on to ensure equity is necessary to add the regulatory definition of results to the indication that to all students, LEAs will report raw scores only, and to the student upon completion of the test, the LEAs will report participation scores only. In other words, you did it or you didn't, on their school accountability report card. And this statement actually appears 3 times in this item on the agenda. While the lack of the healthy fitness zone scores will eliminate all students' ability to satisfy the criteria for the exemption from physical education, they state it right there 3 times. They're stating what we're doing will eliminate all students' ability. So then, and it's related to that gender and the healthy fitness zone piece. Again, if we proceed with scoring our own, which you can choose to do, I think we're in opposition of what State Board's intent was. And that you may decide to do that or not.
Unless we change the minds of the State Board. That we can do.
Yeah. I mean, it's your choice. As again, the CDE said the district may choose to, but the CDE does not support it.
I go by the first part of that sentence.
Okay.
What we need to do is what works for our students, not what works for CDE. They gave us an out.
Right.
So we do it.
I agree.
Mr. Porter would like to make a comment.
This is coming off of the CDE, it's 44258.7, sorry.
That's okay.
Dash B, the question was, may a teacher credentialed in another subject coach a competitive sport for which students receive PE credit? Like your athletic director, and I read the things from Mr. McGilligan, they cover all sports, right? The answer says yes. A person who holds a teaching credential of subject or subject other than PE may be authorized by the local school board, us, to coach 1 period per day in a competitive sport for which the students receive PE credit, provided the full-time employee of the school district and has completed a minimum of 24 hours. Now notice, they use the word sport, which would take in club. They don't use interscholastic. And I also did a deep dive on interscholastic, and you could even include, I believe, from my notes, ROTC, you can include marching band, driver's training, ROP, student-sponsored activities. Lincoln uses ROP, student-sponsored activities. So it sounds like to me that the CDE has so many holes in there, what they've given out, based on this one thing right here, where the AD could sign off on the number of hours for whatever sport. For example, snowboarding is considered a interscholastic sport. So is skiing, so is fencing, so is gymnastics. Band is as well, as long as it's marching. So there are, I mean, if you go to the National Federation of High School Sports, I could go through the whole list with you, and even though we don't have them, they are sports sponsored by the National Federation of High School. So my whole point is in reading this one little tidbit that came off the page, it said our athletic directors, technically, could sign off on, technically, their PE.
Correct.
Right. So, and whether they're doing club or not, they have to turn in so many hours and it's all there. I really think that this is an issue that we can drive a truck through, given what you've said to us tonight and what I've read to you tonight, that we would not be harmed at all. And that way we avoid doing the PFTs for the students that are non-binary.
What he said, yes, let's go.
Just one point is that not all students who choose to get the exemption through the test are in a sport, even a club sport. So there would still be a group of students who would be left out of the exemption because they're not in a school sport or club sport.
Unfortunately, based on what Dr. Sully says, we would be in compliance going with this, then doing the PFT. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the microphone. By doing the PFT, we are not in compliance.
Unless we get scores.
We are not, I'm gonna be honest and say that we're not sure about that because the state board says no, but the CDE says you can do it.
Okay, so can we continue with what we're doing right now? Don't we do a type of testing? Maximum fitness, is that what it's called or something like that? I'll look it
That's
up.
been suspected.
We do the PFT test. It actually was on pause for COVID. It is now required this year by CDE that we do the PFT again, even though the only data they're collecting is participation.
So, okay, I get back to what I just read to you. There are ways around it, and I get back to the fact that maybe we just do a PFT for those kids that want to get exempted, and we call it a day.
That would be an option.
I think that would be the best option.
Good option.
Understanding that the state board is saying that that's not okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Oh, we understand that.
You
that's what I'd
understand,
like to vote on tonight.
Yes.
Okay, hold that. We need to get public comment and student comment, and then
Well,
just
sorry.
formulate in your head what you want. Come on up, Michelle.
One, I want to say thank you to Dr. Solly and whoever worked on getting the other exemption.
I believe this is a good first start that we can expand upon. I vote yes.
Thank you. Mr. Nava?
Yes.
Mr. Neely?
Yes.
Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Mr. Heberly?
Yes.
Mr. Freitas?
If we were all in agreement, why did we take so long?
Because we like to talk.
Yes.
You're a yes and I'm a yes. So OAI 1 passes 7-0. We'd also like to give direction, Mr.
He's got it already.
I think he's got it.
Well,
Dr. Solly, you already know what I'm looking for. Okay, thank you.
everyone's nodding. Fantastic. Look at OAI 2 is ready to go. Second interim financial report. I see you brought your brains with you tonight, Mr.
Thank you, President McFarland, members of the board, Dr. Washer, and speaking of the brains, we're about to present what is pretty horrifying horror show for people like me. So, who better than to present it than your Director of Budgets, Director Adina Andres. So, I'll let her run through her presentation and her work, and I'll add some comment throughout.
Hello, good evening, President McFarland, members of the board, Dr. Washer. If we could get the PowerPoint up, thank you. So we have some major updates since first interim.
Which one?
Oh, let's see, the budget report, second from the bottom. Thank you. So, yeah, our second interim budget report contains some major updates over first interim. As we're waiting for the slide to come up, our revenues, our budget, the specific names are ESSER 3. It's all that COVID relief funds, and then there's additional other funding, like I think we described it at first interim. Categoricals are back. There's no other way to put it. So it's a total of 96.8 million that has been added back into the budget since we met last time. And then of course 80.5 million is new CARES monies. And then we also presented a snapshot of all the funds that we anticipate receiving, the expenditures from 1920 and 2021, and then this year's planned purchases. Enrollment, we're continuing, on the far left, just anticipated kinders are way down, especially when we compare to the outgoing 12th graders.
So if I may add to this slide, we look at things graphically just because they seem to be easier. The green line is last Friday's enrollment data. The black line is last year's CalPADS, what used to be known as CBEDS, and then the red line is a 3-year mean. It's disturbing that last year and the current year are well below the mean, but probably one thing I'd focus attention on to anybody that's interested in this is you've only got 2 cohorts now that are above last year. So the whole curve is shifting down. And these lines are synonymous with the board's revenue.
Thank you. And then next slide, thank you. So enrollment ADA projections, we've been communicating, obviously, due to COVID, we've been held harmless as of 1920, P2 ADA, and then next year, which is the 22-23 fiscal year, is when we will actually be funded on the greater current or prior year. So that is, quite a significant drop. It's the fiscal cliff that we've been communicating about, and also school services. And compounding this, but we're not alone. I would say, whether it's California or nationwide, our ADA is also way below the historical average. Our historical average pre-COVID is about 94.5%. Our latest projections show that we are at the 88% mark on ADA for the current year.
And as Director Andrus mentioned, this is run-of-the-mill in San Joaquin County right now. So COVID's had this effect on us. What's not in Director Andrus's graphics here, because it's still part of the budget play going into May revise, and of course Governor's signature in either June or July, are the several options, one of which is a 3-year average of ADA. It's likely that some type of relief is going to get passed simply because the sheer weight of 1,000 school districts facing this graphic that you see here today, it will probably spur the hearts and minds of our legislatures. But bear in mind, I think that the 3-year average would be best case, but still after 3 years, if there's been no enrollment growth at all, we are right where we are, what we're presenting here. Another thing that it can't be all doom and gloom, but there is money in those littles, and Assistant Superintendent Young and Director Peterson are currently working on the state's move to push into early childhood education, so that could bring additional revenue at some point as well.
Also bring additional cost.
Well, if you start to empty out in your K-12, you'll have credentials that could move. So I'm not sure that we could represent the cost would actually go up.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so our projections are based on current law and, should the 3-year average, ADA on our funding come to fruition, that would be relief for the next 3 years. And we have the slide taken right out of the school services, the governor's January proposed budget as a reference. So yeah, current law is either the greater or current year or prior year. And then up next, we have presented here the trend of fund balance versus expenditures. You do see the increase in, if you're looking from, I would say fiscal year 1920, 2021, 21-22, that's right, COVID happened, a lot of planned expenditures did not occur in 1920, and then there's a lot of CARES and ESSER monies relieved, so that's why we have our fund balance projected to increase until those funds are spent down.
So this is the horror show that I alluded to at the beginning of the presentation. Fortunately, it's still a movie. There are things in your balance sheet that are unlikely to come to fruition or result in expenditures. We've spoken at length about the ghost staffing that exists in PCNs that are fully budgeted, that draw on your adopted budget, your first interim, second interim, and then at unaudited actuals, that ghost cost disappears. Still, this is something that will now force myself and Director Andrus to address in next year's budget. So our work starts tomorrow night with SBAC, and we'll continue in April and May, and we are going to have to remove some of these expenditures that aren't current expenditures, but they're in your budget as though they are, just so the board won't be faced with a county direction due to an excessively low third out year in your 22-23 budget, and most definitely in your 23-24 budget.
Yeah, and just to clarify, that would be anticipated potentially a negative certification from the county on our financial statements. And then on this slide, we have the average teacher staffing with, based on fiscal year, students, declining enrollment, and no anticipated changes to FTE in the ratios.
But I will add to that. So we're certainly here to support the board and the program staff, absolutely and always. But just to give you an example, I mean, this is not a judgmental statement, it is just a statement of mathematical fact. Given the current level of enrollment K-6, that would seem to predicate a staffing allotment of 511 certificated teachers. But given the needs over the last COVID years, the district superintendent and her staff are going to move to pull apart combos and address that intervention by using the LCFL, or what we call LCAP money, which is really supplemental and concentration money. It lives and is spent out of your 0290 and 0291 resources, but your staffing ratios are going to decline again. Your student to teacher ratios over the next few years will decline again. So just something that at this point in time is part of the movie, but will turn to real life at some point in the near future, and the director and I are going to have to address that in future budgets.
And then, the STRS pension cost PERS are increasing in 22-23. In the governor's proposed budget, there was no mention of any relief or, assisting with bringing those rates down.
So, several board members have spoken eloquently either tonight or in past board meetings, generally on the ed services side or on the COVID side, where governor legislature puts out these rules that are extremely onerous to follow. This happens on the fiscal side as well. So the board is likely aware that Department of Finance is projecting a 5.33 COLA for the 22-23 school year. LAO actually has COLA projected at 6.18 right now. Next year should be another good revenue year, but furtively underneath the scenes, they're taking 1.7% back from what they're giving the board.
It just goes somewhere else.
Goes to STRS and PERF.
Yes, and then our next slide shows our updated expenditures at 520 million. Again, this includes all of the CARES revenues that we do not anticipate will be expended this year, but rather, through September 2024. And then here are our ending fund balance projections. This includes both restricted and unrestricted, and it does include the 5.07 for all bargaining groups.
So typically, or the actual requirement of Director Andrus under Ed Code is to present current budget year and 2 ensuing budget years. I've asked Director Andrus to present a 4th year so that the board can see a snapshot at this point in time, only a snapshot of what their 22-23 adopted budget will look like.
Thank you. And then the very next slide is just, we isolated the unrestricted ending fund balance projections. Next slide, please. As of second interim, these are the anticipated reserve assignments. And that concludes our presentation.
If the pleases the board and Dr. Washer, I'd like to add a few comments. I don't wish to bore everybody with the things I sort of naturally gravitate to, but they are important. The money that has flown to schools over the last 2 years comes from somewhere. Generally speaking, in classic economics, there's economic growth, and that's where the money comes from. That hasn't been the case. This has been an unprecedented time in world history, not just U.S. history, where things like the nation's M2 money supply increased over 30% in a 2-year period, whereas decades and decades and decades, it took 90 years for it to grow 30% prior. So this money came from someplace different. I recall first being in this office building in June of 2017 at my interview for this position when Mr. Nava asked me about a recession. He said, people are calling for recessions, what do you think? And my comment was, housing prices are moving up, stocks are up, interest rates are low, unemployment's low. This is not the calculus for recession. Flash forward to March 1st, 2022, we are on the verge of Federal Reserve hikes. Federal Reserve hikes for the first time, and I can't remember when, 2018 was a momentary taper which quickly ended. But a trend of interest rate hikes, I think we have to go back to early 2000s, late 90s. It's a very important thing. To me, an even more important factor is our labor force is shrinking. The back of the envelope GDP calculation is labor force times productivity. So if you've got a shrinking labor force, then we better get a lot more productive or GDP will follow, or will fall, or will not grow. We'll be like in Japan where we're between 0 and 1%, which is where we were pre-COVID. So if GDP is not growing, it's hard to see taxes going up. California is a capital gains wonderland, and yet the stock market is down now. Interest rates are moving up, whether that affects housing or not, I don't know. But it's more likely than not to be a negative. And Warren Buffett's always said that it's only when the tide goes out do you find who is swimming naked. The tide's going out, And the companies that, at least over the last 3-4 weeks, the companies that haven't been making any money and maybe even producing billion-dollar deficits quarterly have been taken to the woodshed. So we're starting to see who's swimming naked in Mr. Buffett's parlance. So going back to the 2017 interview and right now, there are signs. And they're, with the Fed rate hike and the shrinking labor force, they're important signs. So it's something we wanted to introduce at this meeting, and again, we will work extensively with SBAC over the next 3 months to try and pare some of these ghost expenditures down so that we can hopefully buy the board maybe one more year of solid positive certification and then give the board time to work its way out of it. There are other positives as well. I mean, we've heard retirements mentioned sometimes in less than a positive light, but you know, we're financial people and we've got still a couple hundred people at row 20 or higher in our teacher ranks, and they cost more than new kids. So when they retire, that should be a tailwind to the board's budget as well. And there's some other items as well we'll get into it at budget time, but we thought it important to broach on these topics now. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any board comments? Mr. Porter.
I just have a quick question. Mr. Khan, it's kind of a pet peeve. I brought this up before. I'm on slide 10, dealing with your average teacher staffing. You said for the 21-22 year, we have 1,467 teachers. That's correct?
1467, yes, sir.
1467. Out of that, how many teachers are actually not interacting with students?
It's a large number. Actually, that's, no, I misspoke. I was going to include RSP teachers in there. Your question. So I'd say 30, 36 from direct hire.
36 teachers that have no contact with students.
Instructional coaches.
Instructional. So, okay.
Both on the special ed side and unrestricted side as well.
I don't want to touch special ed because it's a whole different category, but
10 to 11 unrestricted.
I just wanted to know who was interacting, because if you're a teacher, you should be working with students. And thank you very much. That's all my question.
I just want to clarify, President McFarland, a coach, someone who is a coach can interact with students and does, I'm not saying that that's their daily, but when they do model lessons or they're assisting teachers in developing differentiated instruction, they are in the classroom working with students. Though they're not assigned to students.
Thank you. Mr. Neely.
Okay, thank you, President Farley. Just real quick, thank you guys. You guys did a great job on this. I do have one quick question on slide 5. What is your experience with how that holds? Like, you've got a 7th grade class there is toward right at the bottom. Can I expect to see that? Have you seen how that carries through, or does that number change from year to year?
So, Michael, I think he's doing the linear graph, that one. You can actually see it. It gets a little. It causes the mind to go cloudy after a while. But if you just compare the current year to the next year, so say the 7th grade at the on the black line, Mr. Neely.
Okay.
Go 1 year to the right where they're 8th graders, and you can see that the 7th grade cohort increased maybe slightly. I'm guessing 10 to 20 kids. The big bulge in the anaconda that you see to the right is our 10th graders. They were huge in the 6th grade.
Okay. So
and they've held on, but the kinders have been declining for many, many years. We're at one point this district enrolled 2,100 kinders, you know, and we're just we're lucky if we can get 1,800 now.
Okay, and all the housing developments we've got all over Lodi Unified have had little impact. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. I would argue, again, we made this argument before, we think it's more of a macro thing. The fertility rates from women of childbearing age are unprecedented. They've never been this low across the developed world, not just in the United States. Children aren't getting born, and population average ages are getting older. So.
That's all I got. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other additional questions?
President McFarland?
Yes.
When we talk about a negative certification from the County Office of Education, what does that mean?
It means in your third out year, you're negative. You have less than zero ending fund balance.
And what are the consequences of that?
County cannot certify your financial statement, and the county will certainly suggest that you pair some of your expenditures.
And if we can't do that?
Well, as we've spoken tonight and on numerous times at SBAC and in board, we have a lot of ghost expenditures built into the board's budget. Those are the most likely things that really need to go.
Well, I mean, I guess in layman's terms, are we talking about this district going bankrupt?
If these images remain unaltered for 5 years, it's a possibility, probability.
Okay.
But again, Mr. Freitas, sir, I'm sorry for interrupting, but
you're not.
There's, there are the balance sheet adjustments that we can make right now that won't impact a single human being. And then there's some other lights at the end of the tunnels, in that we do have a lot of teachers in the lower rows on the salary scale. As they retire, in theory, they will be replaced by lower costing teachers, or being of a certain age, we don't say younger anymore, because it terrifies me to use that word, but lower costing teachers. So there's some tailwind behind this. But I think the board's been very clear at some point that ending fund balance has been too great, and it's time to get them back into line with what's reasonable.
So we take some aggressive action, we cook the books a little bit, and between the two of them, we keep this thing good.
As long as we can strike the cook the books.
All right. We gently marry.
But I think the answer, I think maybe the implicit question is, the board has a couple years, I think, at least. But at some point, the board really is upside down. And the major reason it is it's staffing. We have more staff than any other district in the county on an enrollment or per kid basis.
But this board could lose its financial control of this district and have someone else come in and make these decisions for us if we don't take positive action. Is that correct?
In the years ahead, yes, sir.
And that's part of the negative certification?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we can drive this train off the cliff, or we can start taking action. And, Mr. Khan, Director Andrews, really appreciate this report. I know this isn't an easy report to deliver. In many ways, I'm terrified, but I also know that we're in good hands in the remedies that you will be offering us, and I look forward to your solutions, and I don't think anyone could come up with better solutions than you and your staff, Mr. Khan. So I look forward to hearing what these remedies will look like, because I definitely do not want the financial control of this board taken from this Lodi Unified School Group.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Freitas. Any other board comments? Public comments? In light of that, I need a motion and a second.
Move to approve. Second.
Mr. Neely motion, Mr. Nava second. I'm going to call for a verbal vote. Mr. Knackstead? Mr. Nava?
Aye.
Mr. Neely?
Aye.
Mr. Porter?
Aye.
Mr. Heberling?
Aye.
Mr. Freitas?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. That would be a 7-0 vote. OAI2 passes. Dr. Washer? OAI3.
Thank you, President McFarland, members of the board. This is the return of this item that we did previously. It needs to be done every 30 days as a just in case.
Move to approve.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Porter motioned, and Mr. Nava second. Do we have any board comments? Any public comments? Students are not here. We will vote. Mr. Knexted?
Aye.
Mr. Nava?
Aye.
Mr. Neely?
Aye.
Mr. Porter?
Aye.
Mr. Heberly?
No.
Mr. Freitas?
Aye.
And I would also vote aye. That would be, motion passes 6-1. Mr. McKilligan, spotlight.
Madam President, personnel matters are presented for your consideration.
I move we approve personnel matters.
Thank you. Board comments? Public comments?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Okay.
I see that Agatha Smith, secondary teacher, took A. Awesome math teacher, is retiring.
That's a
And
lot.
I've worked with her for 38 years. She's an incredible teacher.
She's not retiring.
She's not retiring?
No, she's leaving the district.
I'm sorry.
Resignation.
We can't, yeah, you're okay. Yep.
I thought, well, even with her leave, she will be.
Public, thank you, Mr. Porter. Any public comments? We have a motion and a second. Call for the vote. Mr. Knexted?
Aye.
Mr. Nava?
Aye.
Mr. Neely?
Aye.
Mr. Porter?
Aye.
Mr. Heberly?
Aye.
Mr. Freitas?
Aye.
And I also vote aye. That personnel matters pass 7-0. Mr. Warren? Better late than never.
Yeah, 3 minutes.
It's not 11:30, but it feels like it. President McFarland, members of the board, Dr. Washer, before you is proposed revision to Board Policy 5127, which is graduation ceremonies and activities. There are a number of edits made specifically to make revisions to changes in special education since the last time this was revised in 2014.
Great job.
Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Any questions from the board? Mr. Heberly, it looks like he has something to
It
say.
can't be that easy. We gotta make him sweat a little. Come
Please
on,
give me some
Ron.
hard questions.
Look at the dot.
I have no questions.
Motion approved.
Second.
We don't, it's just a report on
Oh,
it,
that's
boys.
right.
It's a report item.
Guys, it's late.
Jeez.
Any public comments?
Oh,
Here we go. Come on up, Michelle.
Thank you, President McFarland. Thanks. We appreciate a lot of the changes and think that this will make a positive influence for our special ed students. As you know, many of our special ed students' parents do look at Lodi because we do have these various pathways. So thank you for the revisions. It looks good. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. No additional board comments? Thank you, Mr. Warren. We're moving on to communications. Michelle, do you have any comments? I should have just kept you. You should have just stayed.
Thank you, President McFarland, members of the board, Dr. Washer, and those still hanging out. It is Read Across America time, and I'm sure you've heard from teachers and going out into classrooms and reading. And as the National Day, I believe, is tomorrow. So thanks for all the support in years past for Read Across America, and hopefully you get out to those classrooms and have some fun activities with students. We are about to come up on a 2-week break. At this time, your teachers are frantically working on grading and working on report cards and all of those comments. So thank you for giving the opportunity for teachers to really excel in some of the programs that they've been able to offer students through like learning, oh my gosh, LDA is now that I can think, Lodi Digital Academy, where we have teachers that are teaching across the district, students that are not at their home site. But that does put more work on them, and so in going forward and report cards, please think of those secondary teachers that have a little bit more work to do than just the one class. As we get forward to break, I hope that you also have an enjoyable break and your teachers enjoy the 2-week break. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Is there any other employee groups in the audience? Moving on, comments from board members. Any additional comments from board members?
I just have a comment. I just want to actually thank Carlos Villafana, one of our administrators, Principal at Serna, Principal at Lawrence, and before that, he's going to actually resign his job and is going into teaching at the secondary level. Just want to thank him for his services. Excellent job in his career so far, and I'm sure that he will proceed with excellent job in what he's going to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hava. I would also agree with you. Mr. Neely.
Thank you, President McFarland. The governor has ended his mask mandate, one thing. That's fantastic. I appreciate that. I can take this thing off. I'm going to wear this until that one's over, and then that's that. But there's also about the 60-day sub. Okay, now that ends on March 31st. He put in a executive order to have that, and it ends on March 31st. However, the long-term subs before that, before March 31st, that does not apply to them. So on April 1, they start again. Now, we've always talked about it being a 30-day term, but the governor in his message mentions it as a 60-day sub. Can we have long-term subs in place for 60 days now?
The governor cleverly left all of those things at the end of that executive order in place and said that nothing before March 31st counts, which means all of the retirees that came out, all the substitutes, everybody, nothing counts, any service before you start counting on March 30th, which means they get to finish the year. That's what he did for us.
And also the 180 days.
Okay.
That's fantastic. Okay, so
They have to start counting their STRS money thing too, though. So if some people run out on they exceed their amount, they might have to stop. But I don't think that's going to apply to most people.
So do our schools know that this 30-day sub is actually 60? Yeah?
What they admittedly know versus what we've communicated to people that are in these situations may be different, but we have known from the county that this was coming for a while. So
Okay.
We are aware, and we are going to be leaving people in place.
Fantastic. Okay, that's great. Thank you, sir. Also, Dr. Washer, please look at the parents on campus. Let's go ahead and try to revise that order as well. And then Lodi High. God, you guys did a great job on that. The ceremony was great. The building was great. I took my brother to it. He was in the original class in 1957 there at Lodi High. And so he and I walked around there, and then we both saw that an English class that we were in and an algebra class had already been torn down. So, yeah, the destruction's moving right ahead on that. So anyway, that's all I've got.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you very
Neely.
much.
Any other board comments from the other side?
The dark side. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Just quickly, what an amazing ribbon cutting presentation. I'd like to thank everyone that was responsible for it. I have a feeling that Chelsea had a lot to do with that because it went off without a hitch. It was an amazing display for our community. It was well represented by public officials and the board that was all there, and everyone was appropriately blown away as well they should have been. So great job.
Thank you, Mr. Freitas. Everybody else is done. I will wrap up real quick. Thank you, Dr. Washer, regarding your comments for mask mandates. It is a welcome change that will happen when we come back from break. As board members, we can't always say what we'd like to say, and so we do a lot of smiling. There's a lot of us that would like to say a lot, and we try to have more class than that. And there are a lot of, I want to use the correct word here, there was a lot of barriers for us to do what we would like to do. In our personal lives, we all have choices. In our professional board capacity, we don't have choices. If you don't like what's happening, there are people that make decisions that we must execute. So I think in the future when we hit these hurdles, and hopefully we will not hit a mask hurdle again, that you go to the proper authorities and take them to task. We care about our children, we care about our staff, and while the mask might be coming off for 9:30.
Awesome.
We don't, it says we don't have to.
Gary.
Anybody going outside?
Hi,
Gary.
Are you going outside? We go upstairs.
Turn your computer off for you now. Don't have
I already put it on cabinet.
Very nice statement.
I mean, we work around it. Yeah, but it is, I'm not displaying what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'll look at it.
Okay, but yeah, that's
Tuesday, about Monday, about noon. I'll think about that.
I'm going to end this call.
Yes, please.
As opposed to ending. Yeah, oh no, there's